stake in this election. Let's bring in Texas Senator Ted Cruz, who is up for re-election this year. Senator, always a pleasure. Let me start with this move with, again, more student loan bailouts. 30 million people targeted. So this is essentially the president telling almost 90% of Americans who have no student loan debt, go jump in a lake or screw yourself. Yeah. But it also, again, it is uprooting the rule of law and ignoring what he knows will probably be overturned by the courts. Again, it is just uprooting the norms of this country, is it not?
Yeah, Dagan, you're exactly right. This was a shameless decision by Joe Biden and the Democrats, and sadly, it was utterly unsurprising. Look, the most consequential political shift of the last decade has been the Republican Party becoming a blue-collar party, a party of working men and women. And the flip side of that is the Democrat Party abandoning the blue collar. With this decision, what Joe Biden is saying is to every steel worker, to every truck driver, to every construction worker, to every blue-collar worker, that the Democrats don't care about you, and they're going to take your money and they're going to give it to woke gender studies majors because their interest is trying to buy votes. This is not complicated. Joe Biden is engaged in a vote-buying scheme. Now, he's assuming young people with student loans are naive and gullible because he's going to promise them this, but he knows it is blatantly lawless. He tried this before, right before the last election, and the Supreme Court struck it down, said the president doesn't have the ability to give away $1 trillion without Congress acting. This is Biden being cynical, trying to buy votes, and lying to young people at the same time that he's throwing working men and women under the bus.
Senator, I want to move on to this because in an opinion piece in the Wall Street Journal, you said, quote, the Senate's duty is to put Mayorkas on trial for the catastrophe we've seen at the southern border. Meanwhile, White House spokesperson Ian Sams is out there calling the effort, quote, a complete waste of time that constitutional legal experts have said is unconstitutional. He goes on to say that the worst part of that extreme Republicans have promoted this silly, baseless stunt. At the same time, they have killed an actual bipartisan border security bill that would have addressed the challenges at the border and delivered needed resources to Homeland Security. So I guess a two-part question for you, Senator. How do you respond to the White House, number one? But number two, if Schumer doesn't take up this impeachment, what impact does this have on the functionality of the Senate?
All right, let's take them one at a time. Listen, the reason the White House is desperately trying to avoid this topic is because Joe Biden and the Democrats' open borders is a disaster. It's a humanitarian disaster. I spent a lot of time in South Texas. No one who sees the body bags, the children who are brutalized, the women who are raped, you can't defend this anymore. It's a public safety disaster. We're seeing over and over again murderers and child rapists being released by Joe Biden, going on to kill Americans, and it is a national security disaster. You know, we've got a war in the Middle East. We've got Iran pledging retaliation against the United States, and Joe Biden and the Democrats have opened up our southern border as an invitation to terrorists. I got to tell you, Sean, I think we have a greater risk right now of a major terrorist attack than we have had any time since September 11th. All of that together explains why Chuck Schumer desperately wants to avoid a trial on Alejandro Mayorkas' impeachment. What I laid out in that Wall Street Journal op-ed is the Constitution is clear and the Senate practice is clear. 21 times in our nation's history, the House has sent an impeachment over to the Senate. 4 of those times, the individual resigned or left before the impeachment, and so the Senate did not consider those 4 once it was mooted. In every other instance, all of them, 100% of the time, the Senate had a trial and adjudicated guilt or innocence. What Schumer's trying to do is avoid a trial, avoid the House presenting evidence, and avoid Democrat senators having to go on record for guilt or innocent because they cannot defend these disastrous open borders.
You mentioned, Senator, Iran. Well, it looked like Iran in Michigan on Friday.
Yes.
There was a Ramadan celebration in Michigan that took an ugly turn as a group of anti-Israel protesters began repeating this chant.
الموت لأمريكا! الموت لأمريكا! الموت لأمريكا!
where are we in this country at a time that's happening, and the Democrats are turning their backs one by one on our ally Israel? Nancy Pelosi joining a letter signed by 40 House Democrats urging President Biden to stop transferring weapons to Israel. That is the very definition of betrayal, as the Wall Street Journal op-ed writes.
Yeah, listen, that's exactly right. Number one, that video you just showed shows exactly the kind of anti-American zealots that Joe Biden and the Democrats are letting into America, that are jeopardizing our safety. But number two, screaming mobs yelling death to Israel and death to America, that is the Democrat Party base right now. The terrifying thing is that's who they're listening to. And I got to say, the problem is not just the squad. It's not just AOC and Tlaib and Omar. They are a problem, to be sure. But the problem is the so-called mainstream Democrats. It's Chuck Schumer, it's Nancy Pelosi, it's Joe Biden. They're the ones that are actively betraying Israel. They're the ones. It was Chuck Schumer who stood on the Senate floor and demanded the democratically elected leader of Israel be thrown out of office. That was disgraceful. It was Joe Biden who orchestrated a resolution in the United Nations effectively condemning Israel. And now Nancy Pelosi is throwing her lot in with the radicals. It is tragic, and it's very dangerous for our country.
Senator Ted Cruz, always a pleasure to see you, and thanks for being with us on The Bottom Line. We are grateful.
Thank you.